Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 26 of True Crime All the Time. I'm Mike Ferguson, and with me, as always, is my partner in true crime, Mike Gibson. Gibby, how are you today?
I'm doing good, man. Cinco de Mayo.
It is Cinco de Mayo we're recording on, and, man, we're having some crazy monsoon-type weather.
I know it.
I don't know what the frick is going on.
It's flood season around here.
It has rained every day for a week at least.
I got my ark ready.
Every single day. In 2016, California wife and mother Sherry Papini disappeared for 22 days. When she was found, she told authorities a detailed account of being kidnapped and tortured. Years later, in a stunning twist, Papini pled guilty to making false statements about what happened to her, setting off a media firestorm. Now, for the first time, Sherry Papini is telling her side of the story and revealing shocking new information. Sherry Papini, Caught in a Lie, an ID documentary event, Monday, May 26th at 9 on ID. Set your DVR. So we've been getting a ton of social media interaction lately. It's amazing. We love it. We got a shout out from Christopher Darden from the OJ trial on Twitter. That was cool.
That was really cool.
Shout out from Mark Garagos, another big attorney in Los Angeles.
Super cool.
He was actually Scott Peterson's attorney, which, you know, we did an episode on Scott Peterson. I think I even mentioned his name. What I like about him is I listen to him and Adam Carolla. They have a podcast called Reasonable Doubt. I listen to it every week. So that was really cool that the two of them gave us a shout out.
I think they want Gibby on that, by the way.
Or they want Gibby on Reasonable Doubt?
Yeah, I think we're in talks.
He didn't say anything to me, but so maybe he's just talking to you.
It's behind the scenes. We're in talks.
He's going to cut me out.
Yeah.
You know, some of that was due to, you know, amazing new listener, Rachel. Rachel, thank you so much.
Thank you, Rachel.
For your support and turning some high influential people onto the podcast. That was really cool. All right, so let's jump into Patreon shout outs. We got some new supporters that we love. Jason Stroud, Selena Ginger, Kate Melb, Melanie Link, Joe DeVee, which is just a cool name.
I like that name.
Really cool. And Allie. So thank you all so much for becoming new supporters of True Crime All the Time. And
thank you.
Like we always say, we appreciate it, and we appreciate all the people that continue to support us.
Love it.
Some have been with us from the very beginning, and very, very cool. All right, so definitely check out our website, truecrimealltime.com. Check out our contact info. You know, follow us on Facebook. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter. We love that interaction. We can't get enough.
Reach out to Gibby.
Reach out to Gibby at Gibby True Crime. Is that yours?
I think so.
I don't even know what your Twitter handle is.
But you find True Crime All the Time on Twitter. You'll find Gibby.
Yeah. Then definitely click on our merchandise. You know, right now we're offering 10% off of anything at the store. All right, Gibbs, what are we talking about tonight?
On Cinco de Mayo, we are talking about Jeremy Jones.
You almost said Jeremiah, didn't
I
you?
did.
He wants to say Jeremiah so bad.
I do.
So
I'm sure I will.
Yeah, I'm sure you will at some point. Jeremy Bryan Jones. So one of the reasons I think why we picked this one, we try to find some of the lesser known cases that does present some problems. Number one, it's hard to find some cool clips, which a lot of people like the clips.
Right.
Number two, it's hard to find the research.
Extremely difficult.
Yeah. So, but this case was fascinating to me, and I really liked it. And so we wanted to do it. Jeremy Jones is what you would call a disorganized thrill killer. Now, he would ultimately confess to killing 13 people, but would not be convicted of all these people. And obviously, we're going to get into all the nuts and bolts, and we're going to discuss a lot of the reasons for that as we go along.
I've had women that 18, 19 years old, hadn't really messed with drugs, might have been even only had sex once or twice. Here, smoke a little of this. Here, This is how I do it. I shoot up. You try that. I was a good kid, I thought. And then I experimented with dope. Well, when I started sticking that needle in my arm, I turned into an evil monster. I did things that I don't even like to talk about, saying that I'm ashamed of, that I'll deny to my... I mean, I know what I did, and God knows what I did. But for me to sit and tell somebody else, I'm saying you'd have to, you know what I'm saying? I mean, it'll make you do things, make you do things you're totally ashamed of.
I think that might be the understatement of the year.
Yeah.
Because this guy has a lot to be ashamed of. But there's a couple things about this clip that I have to talk about. So number one, this is like this was a service message put out by a county sheriff in Georgia. They got Jeremy Jones to talk in the service message, right? So obviously it's a much longer clip. It's like 30 minutes or 28 minutes.
Yeah.
They're talking about the dangers of methamphetamine.
Oh, okay.
And that's what he's talking about. So he got on meth, and basically he's saying, you know, I was an angel until now we might find out otherwise.
Yeah, I think we probably will.
But he's saying I was an angel, and then I got addicted to meth, and that's what led me down this path. Now, don't get me wrong. I think it had a big, big influence on him, but I don't know if whether or not he ever sees meth changes everything for him. I just thought it was so interesting that this is like a public service announcement that probably went out on something.
It's kind of like the old PSA that we used to have with the, this is your brain. This is your brain on.
Like the skillet with the eggs.
Yeah. Yeah. Something like that. But this is with crack and
Gibby was like, man, I'm hungry. I don't do drugs, but I'm hungry.
I made me some scrambled eggs after watching that. Clearly his addiction was crack.
No, meth.
I don't know really I don't know that. I don't do drugs.
I see how you're trying to tell the listeners that you don't know anything.
Shaking my head.
Nobody's buying any of that. No, I'm just kidding. You're like, Gibby's trying to say he doesn't know the difference between crack and meth. And
I don't.
The only reason I know what meth is from Breaking Bad.
That's a good show.
That was a good show, man.
Yeah.
Missed that show.
Well, you gotta watch the follow-up.
I do watch it.
I love that.
Better Call Saul?
I watch it.
Oh, yeah, it's great.
Every Monday night.
We get off topic, but that's all right.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Got to promote some shows we like.
Yeah.
People want to know maybe what we listen to or what we watch, or maybe they're saying, "What are you talking about, man? Just get
back to Jeremy Jones."
Got to talk a little bit about Jeremy's early life. Now, we don't have a ton, not as much as maybe we do on a lot of these cases, but Jeremy Bryan Jones was born April 12th, 1973. So very close to my age, 15, 17 years younger than Gibby.
Wow.
No, I'm just kidding. Very close to our age.
Very close to our age, sure.
He grew up in a middle-class home in a place called Miami, Oklahoma, which I've never heard of before. And Miami had a population of about 14,000. And I saw it described as kind of a bleak landscape, basically a lot of abandoned lead and zinc mines.
Mm.
And Gibbs, I'm not sure why, but have you noticed we've had a ton of cases from Kansas and Oklahoma?
Yeah, have you ever driven through there?
I've never driven.
Have you?
If I did go, I might.
You might drive or driven?
I might drive.
Yeah.
But it's
a lot of cornfields, man.
What is that? What are you saying? That breeds serial killers?
No, I'm just saying you get a little bored. You got to find things to do.
So I was saying it's not on purpose that we're picking on Kansas and Oklahoma. Maybe you are. I am not.
Well, you're the one that's picking the cases, so I'm trying to think you are. By the way, he loves it when you email him and tell him about it.
It's just a weird coincidence. When I picked Jeremy Jones, I didn't know where he was born. I hadn't gotten that far in the research.
Right.
I just thought he was interesting.
He is interesting. I mean, that's the cool thing. He's definitely interesting.
Yeah, I thought the story was fascinating. But when I found out he was born in Oklahoma, then I thought, man, we are really covering a lot of cases in Kansas and Oklahoma.
Yeah, we really have.
So you Kansans and Oklahomans, Homians? Don't take offense. So Jeremy's mother was a florist, and his father was a woodshop supervisor, and Jeremy had one younger sibling. So like I said, unlike a lot of our other cases, we don't know a ton about the childhood of Jeremy Jones.
Well, he's also a young killer. I mean,
Yeah, we're going to find out that he started at like 19,
yeah. I mean, it's pretty young.
but he did have a childhood.
Well, you say so.
Now, he would claim later on, and again, we talk about this, Gibbs, but we're going to be talking and describing a lot of things that would not come out till much later. And a lot of these things were told to investigators by Jeremy Jones. So we're going to be trying to, just like investigators are still trying to separate a lot of fact from fiction. But so he would claim that he was abused as a child and that both of his parents abused drugs and alcohol. But like I said, we're going to see throughout this story that he would claim a lot of different things. And it was really tough for investigators when they started sifting through all of his ramblings, what was real, what was not real. As it relates to his childhood, you know, from what I could gather, he didn't suffer any major head trauma. That's something that we always look for and talk about. He was not sexually abused that I could find. My thought is that what he becomes later on in life is fueled a lot by the drugs, more than what you and I typically see and say, oh my gosh, this guy had a horrible childhood. It doesn't mean that he should have gone on and committed all the crazy acts that he did, but at least we're giving you a window into how this person grew up. I don't know that this guy had a horrible childhood. I can't say that. But it could be a mixture here, right? If some of the things that he's saying are true, but we just don't have the proven facts. So I don't know. I'm not seeing anything in the research that tells me here's a trigger that would have led Jones down this bad path.
Well, the trigger is if his parents were abusing drugs and alcohol and he seen that and he realizes it was okay. My parents did drug and alcohol, so I'll do drugs and alcohol, right? So he gets into drugs and he does his choice of drugs turn out to be a bad choice, and they have a major impact on his psyche.
Okay, I see what you're saying there.
So that's where he can go back and, so if you're shooting up right now in front of your kids, stop.
Don't do that.
Don't do it.
I still make the case that it's not the prototypical serial killer story where
No.
I got dropped on my head 4 or 5 times.
Right. Sexually abused by my aunt, uncle,
Right.
whoever.
Tortured animals.
Yeah.
I wet the bed until I was 37.
Right.
I'm not seeing all of those,
No.
all of those things.
But I don't know if you need to see that in this one.
Yeah, because this is a little different. You're right. This is maybe more fueled by substance.
And I've heard that with not serial killers, but I've heard it with other people that when they do certain drugs, especially the ones that they inject, they're like another person. So.
What about bath salts when that guy ate some other guy's face off?
Yeah, he was just trying to be like Walking Dead.
So it does happen. So let's talk about Jeremy's first run-in with the law. 1990, he's only 16 years old. So he was charged as a minor with assaulting a boy. And when this boy's mother came to his defense, Jeremy assaulted her as well. He got charged with assault.
I don't know about you. I mean, did you ever get any fights in high school?
A couple times.
Yeah.
I saw a lot of fights.
I mean, we never got charged with assault, though.
No, but I never hit somebody's mother.
Oh, you never did?
No.
No.
I think that was frowned. I always thought that was frowned upon.
Yeah, it is.
Is the way I looked at it. No, yeah, there was a lot of fighting, and I can remember going to the park one time and these two guys had beef, and the one guy threw the other guy a pool stick and said, "I'm going to give you this as your defensive weapon."
You know what I'd bring?
K-bar.
K-bar. Settles everything.
Yeah. Nothing like that. And certainly if I was in a fight and somebody's mom came out, my natural inclination would not be to jump up and start fighting her.
Right. Yeah.
I think it goes without saying. Well, maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. But he had a lot of trouble in high school.
Yeah. Sounds like he had a little temper.
Yeah, I think he had a temper. He transferred because of some discipline problems. He transferred schools and really was in high school a short time. He dropped out.
What was the name of the city that new high school was in?
I think it's Quapaw.
Quapaw.
That's what I'm going with.
Quapaw.
There's a really funny thread, I think it was on Facebook, about how podcasts pronounce names of cities.
Right.
And people were getting a big kick out of it. But if you think about it, I mean, it's pretty hard.
It is hard.
I've never heard of half of these cities.
I can't even say states right.
We're not talking about you. I'm just talking about regular people with regular vocabularies.
Gotcha.
Come on now. All right, so let's jump straight to May of 1992. Jeremy Jones is 19 years old. And a young female, 20 years old, her name is Jennifer Judd, is found dead in Baxter Springs, Kansas. Jennifer was a newlywed. She had just married her high school sweetheart, Justin, 9 days before this happened. She ultimately was stabbed to death with a knife in the kitchen, right inside her own home. And it was her husband, Justin, who found her body. So think about this, Gibbs. Can you imagine the woman that you love, you've just married, you're 9-10 days into this marriage, and you come home and you discover your newlywed has been brutally killed?
That's devastating, man. I mean, that is devastating.
Well, and we talk about this. Who's the first person they're going to look at?
Oh, yeah. Definitely the spouse.
Yeah. So I assume they looked at Justin right away. I don't know what the insurance situation is. And I mean, take all that out of it. It doesn't matter. The spouse is always the first person usually that is looked at.
Yeah. I mean, you're right. And that's always like and that makes sense. I mean, why wouldn't you look at that first?
No, I think they have to.
Yeah.
I think they have to rule out the spouse. They found her keys on the living room floor, and there was a lunch that she had packed for Justin. She was going to take it to him. And the lunch they found on the front seat of the car. So I'm thinking she had gone out, put the lunch in the front seat of the car, had come back.
Right.
Maybe because she forgot something. Now, Jeremy Jones would later confess, and again, we're going to be saying this a lot, right? Because we know these details because Jeremy Jones tells the details later on. But he would confess that this was his first murder. So what he would say, Gibbs, is that he stalked and he, with the intent to rape Jennifer, and ended up stabbing her to death. So like I said, Justin and Jennifer, they were just married on May 2nd. They started dating in high school when they were just 15, and I think she was 15 and he was 16.
Yeah, high school sweethearts.
So it was said, Gibbs, that on that day, Jennifer was involved with post-wedding things, sending out thank you cards and all that type of stuff. I mean, that's how close we are from this wedding. She was still in the process of sending all that stuff out.
It's just barely a week old. I mean, just outside of a week, right? 8 days?
Yeah.
So,
she hadn't even taken her wedding dress to the cleaner yet.
I mean, maybe, and we don't know, maybe they just got back from their honeymoon.
Right. Well, I assume they did. I mean, that's kind of the normal thing. No matter where they went, they probably went somewhere for a week or so and had not been back that long. Now, investigators would say that she died from multiple stab wounds to the chest. Like we said, they found her in the kitchen. She was not bound, and they said there was no evidence of sexual assault. Jeremy Jones had said his intent was to rape her. He tried to rape her. I don't know if she had fought him so much that he never got that chance or never got to that point because she put up such a fight. That's what I'm thinking.
I'm hoping that's what happened. I'm hoping that she put up such a good fight that he didn't get a chance to rape her, that he didn't get that satisfaction.
Well, I think we can make that assumption because the investigators are saying there was no evidence of sexual assault.
Yeah.
Now, her husband would come out and say some things afterwards, and some of the things that he thought was that the attacker was very strong. The knife handle itself had actually been broken off during this violent assault, and it was never located at the house, never found. So it broke off. The blade stayed inside of her, and the attacker would have taken the handle with them.
Yeah, well, I mean, they said it was a kitchen knife, so and I'm just trying to think of my kitchen knives, and it'd be pretty hard to...
Your kitchen knives are all K-bars?
Okay, bars, yeah. I mean, it'd be hard to break off. You know, even the cheap knives, right, that the blade doesn't run all the way through the handle, right, which I imagine this is what they had.
Maybe, yeah.
You know, there's still, unless you use so much force, so that's how brutal it had to be then.
Now, one thing that was very interesting that Justin had to say was that, you know, sometime after this violent incident occurred, he had found out somehow from someone that in the days leading up to Jennifer's death, somebody had been pounding on their front door trying to get in, and Jennifer was so frightened that she hid behind a couch. So I don't know if she didn't tell him this, because my understanding is he didn't find it out until days later. Maybe she told another family member or something like that. Justin's thought is that, you know, somebody was infatuated with his wife, and it was this wedding that had just occurred that was the breaking point to send this person into some type of jealous rage. And, you know, if you see the picture of Jennifer, I mean, she was very, very just beautiful. And I think Justin thought there were some people out there, or probably one in particular, that was just infatuated with her.
And jealous of her relationship with him?
Just to put it out there, Justin Judd was cleared of any involvement. But there was a police chief that at one point in time came out and said that there was a friend of Justin's that was a suspect. He was questioned, but never arrested. So again, we're going to be talking about some of these cases as we go along. Jeremy Jones ultimately confesses to this, but there's a lot of mystery or a lot of doubt around some of his confessions. To kind of close out, you know, this first murder that Jones says he committed at the age of 19, there were no clues left at the scene. And at the time, there was really no apparent motive and no suspects. Now, this friend of Justin's would come out later as a possible suspect. And then much later, Jones would put himself as a suspect just through admitting to the murder. True Crime All the Time is sponsored by BetterHelp. You know, folks, therapy can feel like a big investment, but let's think about the state of your mind. It's just as important as your physical health. Traditional in-person therapy can cost anywhere from $100 to $250 per session, which adds up really fast. But with BetterHelp Online Therapy, you can save on average up to 50% per session. With BetterHelp, you pay a flat fee for weekly sessions, saving you big on cost and time. And you get quality care at a price that makes sense and can help you with anything from anxiety to everyday stress. Your mental health is worth it, and now it's within reach. I've used the BetterHelp service for years, and I love the fact that, you know, I can connect with a therapist in a comfortable spot in my home on my laptop. With over 30,000 therapists, BetterHelp is the world's largest online therapy platform, having served over 5 million people globally. Your well-being is worth it. Visit betterhelp.com/TCAT today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/TCATT. You know, even the smallest step forward can make a big difference in your financial future. When you open a Chime checking account, you're one step closer to a better financial future with no maintenance fees, fee-free overdraft up to $200, or getting paid up to 2 days early with direct deposit. Making progress has never been easier. I think we've all been in that position where we've had an overdraft. Well, with Chime, you can overdraft up to $200 with no fees. That's amazing. And they have over 50,000 fee-free ATMs. Make progress towards a better financial future with Chime. Open your account in 2 minutes at chime.com/TCAT. That's chime.com/TCATT. Chime feels like progress. Banking services and debit card provided by the Bancorp Bank N.A. or Stride Bank N.A., members FDIC. Spot me eligibility requirements and overdraft limits apply. Fees apply at out-of-network ATMs. MyPay eligibility requirements apply. Credit limits range from $20 to $500. $2 fee applies to get funds instantly. Crime checking account required. Go to chime.com/disclosures for details. All right, so if we jump ahead to 1995, Jeremy Jones is arrested on his first rape charge. So the very next year in 96, he would be arrested for a second rape charge. And along with that, accused of battering another woman. It was said that he had fired a gun to threaten a woman as well. And to top all that off, he's arrested for possession of meth. So in 95, he's already down the meth path.
Yeah, one murder, 2 rapes, and a couple drug charges.
Right. So I don't know when he started taking meth. I could never find that out. But we know at least by 95, 96. And again, he's only 22, 23 years old at this time. And I know we touched on it briefly, but this whole meth addiction is going to be a central theme to this whole mess with Jeremy Jones. Now, in 1996, Daniel Oakley, 38, Doris Harris, 41. They're both found shot to death in Delaware County, Oklahoma. This is another one that later on Jones would end up confessing to.
So this one's a little strange because it's a couple. They're older, right? I mean, it's not like his first victim that he killed, which was most likely somebody he had a infatuation with, and you know what I mean? She was younger, around his age, and this is definitely, older people for him.
Well, yeah, when you're 23 years old, there's no doubt. And I think you're going to see as we go along that if what he is saying is true, and I have to keep saying that because, we'll talk about it. We just don't know how much is true. He did have a type, and his type was younger women, younger, pretty girls, I'll call them. Some women, some actually girls. So I think you're making a valid point, Gibbs, when you say man and woman couple, a little bit older. But here again, this is one where, because so much time has elapsed, right? There are still clues. There are still people trying to figure out what really happened to Daniel Oakley and Doris Harris. And Doris's sister is one that's really been, trying to figure this whole thing out of who killed her sister. At one point, she travels to Miami, Oklahoma, starts reviewing court files, all related to her sister's killing. And she discovers, while looking in these files, almost playing like amateur detective, she discovers an unidentified fingerprint, 4 unidentified palm prints that had been lifted from inside a car belonging to her sister's boyfriend. The bodies of Oakley and Harris are found inside their mobile home, and they've been shot to death, and the home was set on fire.
Well, that's a good way to cover up evidence.
And you're going to see that a couple times. And I think that's one of the things that possibly ties Jeremy to some of these things. That morning that the bodies were found, there was a man named Denny Honeycutt who was arrested in North Miami. And police say he was intoxicated and he was actually driving Oakley's car. He ended up being held for a whole year as a material witness, which you got to wonder, why in the heck is he driving her car?
Right.
He ends up getting convicted of drug charges and sent to prison. He's ultimately released. So you've got prints that are found that belong to Honeycutt. You've got prints that obviously belong to Oakley and Harris. You know you're going to find those.
Right.
And this is all according to the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation. Back to Doris's sister Paula, what some of the things she found, there was a mention of fingerprints and palm prints that didn't belong to Harris, Oakley, or Honeycutt. So the question I have, Gibbs, is did they match up those prints to Jeremy Jones? I couldn't find the answer.
Yeah, I couldn't either.
Now, you would think that they would try to, but there again, I wish I could have found it. I just don't know. Now, what they did say and continue to say is that Jeremy Jones is and always has been a person of interest in those killings.
Well, I mean, clearly his prints were on file from some of the previous things that he was arrested for. So just because there's some prints, I mean, who knows who's been, I mean, you can take your vehicle and think about how many people's been in it. They could lift prints out of there and it doesn't mean anything.
I think you're absolutely right. You and I go back and forth on prints, and, you know, I think prints are good. I think they're good to include somebody. What I always get weirded out about is when prints are used to exclude somebody, saying they couldn't have possibly done it because this wasn't their print.
Yeah, I don't think you should ever discount it. I just think you...
But they do.
I don't know why. I mean,
I've seen a lot of cases where they do. And it said this couldn't have been the person because the print that we found doesn't match.
Yeah,
but like you said, maybe that print is just random person. And
yeah, that could have been me getting in the car, and then right after me, somebody else gets in the car and doesn't touch, right?
Or they use gloves.
Or they're really good about wiping down what they don't want people to find.
So again, you and I are not forensic experts, although we like to play that we are.
We know how to clean up our prints.
But I think it's interesting to talk about. In this time between when he committed the rapes and when he was given this 5 years probation, it's possible that he killed this couple, Daniel Oakley and Doris Harris.
Absolutely.
Gibbs, I mean, this sounds eerily similar to something that you and I talk about a lot. And that's how these people that are going to go on eventually to commit these very, very violent acts, they often seem to get these slaps on the wrist early on in life.
Absolutely, man. They get like a Monopoly get out of jail free card or something.
It almost seems like that because 5 year probation for 2 rapes, apparently beat up or assaulted somebody else, threatened a woman with a gun. You would think you'd get something a little bit more, but
you think?
That's
why I'm not worried about carrying around my K-bar.
And I don't know every single detail on this, but I guess to me, it just seems like he should have received more than just a 5 year probation if he really did rape 2 women.
Even if it was attempted rape, you would think you get more than 5 years probation.
Yeah, you would think.
But rape, come on now.
So Jones is somewhat quiet for a couple of years after all this happens. Now, granted, he's on a 5 year probation. He's got to be...
Yeah, he's watching his P's and Q's maybe a little bit better than he normally would have.
Has to. Now, one of the things that he has to do is attend these sex offender classes, which by everything I read, he hated going to these. So much so that he told his mom, I don't want to listen to those perverts talk. So he's calling everybody else in the class a pervert, yet he's convicted of raping women.
Well, in his head, he doesn't think he's one because it's only when he puts the needle in his arm does he turn into this pervert.
And that could be. I mean, maybe he has a warped sense of what he did versus what other people did or what problems they have.
That's what he said in the very beginning, right? I turn into some monster when I inject myself.
So like I said, he's good for a little while, for as far as we know. Good for him, let's say. But in 99, he ramps up again, because in September of 99, he kills Justin Hutchings. And Justin is a 19-year-old from Pitcher, Oklahoma. Now, according to Jones, he killed Justin Hutchings by drugging him. So almost like some type of lethal injection, and that's the way that he murdered him. In December of that same year, Danny Freeman, 40 years old, and his wife, Kathy, 38, they're found shot to death in their house in Welch, Oklahoma. And again, Gibbs, this was where it comes back to what we were talking about earlier. The house had been set on fire and burned down.
Good way to cover up.
It is, and we're going to see this a couple of times. So, again, we're going to talk about, did Jeremy Jones do all of this? But a lot of these, there are some similarities in some of these cases. There's no doubt about that. And to your point, that's exactly what authorities thought. They thought that the killer or killers set the fire just to cover up the slaying. Setting the house on fire is not the priority. The priority was to commit the murders. Setting the fire is just a good way to cover up evidence or eliminate evidence and all those types of things. Now, in the house, the Freemans had a daughter, Ashley. She was only 16 years old. That night, she happened to have a friend of hers named Loria Bible, also 16. She was staying the night at the Freemans' house. Both of the girls were missing. They were not found in the house. But the strange thing about it was that Loria's car was found at the house. Her keys were still inside it, and her purse was found inside the house in the rubble, when the house burned down. Now, one thing that investigators also found, they found just tons of weapons that apparently had belonged to Danny Freeman. It was alleged that he was a marijuana dealer, and so they thought at one point that maybe that played into it.
Well, if it's true, it makes sense with having a large amount of weapons on hand, and we know that Jeremy was a drug user, so that could be how they had their relationship.
Well, and he would go on. He would later say to investigators that he killed the couple, he kidnapped the girls, he raped one of the girls, shot them both, and dumped their bodies down an abandoned mine shaft. Now, to your point, when he confessed, he said that the reason that he did this was over a drug debt. So back to this person allegedly being a marijuana dealer. Ashley and Loria, they were never seen after that night. There were searches done, even after Jones confessed. They searched different wells and abandoned mine shafts that they thought they could have been in.
We never found him.
No, never found him.
Wow.
Ashley Freeman was legally declared dead in October of 2010. Now, one thing that one of the investigators would come out and say that he thought if Jones had committed all four of these murders, he believed that the rape charges that Jones had levied against him had taught him a lesson. And that lesson was that you don't want to leave a witness. Some of this is going to feel like deja vu because Jones would recant his confession on this later on. And this is like the cat and mouse game that occurred after he was caught. He confessed to things and then he would say, no, I didn't do it. And again, we'll get into some more of that later. The leads that he gave, like I mentioned, some of the mine shafts and abandoned wells and things like that, they never played out. And so I think this is one that the police ultimately, they just don't, they don't believe that he was involved, or there's a lot of them that they're not sure. But one interesting fact about this one is that the owner of the property of where the Freemans lived, so I guess, let's say they were renting this property, the owner was later convicted of murdering a girl.
No,
So that's a very interesting fact.
I say this every time, it's like we research the killer, and as we're doing the research, it never fails. There's multiple killers that pop up throughout our research in the same area, tied in somehow in that community. So I'm not surprised that here we go again. We're looking at Jeremy Jones, but yet there's going to be somebody else we're talking about that was convicted of killing somebody.
Well, what it tells you is that there's a boatload of killers out there because, this is not New York City. These are small towns in Oklahoma.
Yeah.
I never could find anything where they were able to tie this guy that owned the property that did go to jail for murdering a girl, where they were able to tie him to any of these murders. Let's jump forward a little bit in time to October of 2000, because something happens that kind of triggers a whole series of events in Jeremy Jones's life. Number one, his probation is revoked and an arrest warrant is issued out for him. And really what this does, it begins almost like a second chapter to his life, or a different life altogether. Because this is when, he's in Oklahoma, but as soon as this warrant is issued and he finds out, he goes on the run and he becomes a fugitive, right? He doesn't want to go to jail. But what he does is he ends up selling his truck. So he gets $3,000 out of this truck, and he gets something even more important and almost priceless for somebody in his position, because he had met this woman in a bar in Joplin, Missouri, as he's on the run. And this woman just happened to be the mother of an inmate that was in a Missouri prison. And I guess he told her what was going on in his charming way, because it's one thing we haven't talked about. So Jeremy Jones was a pretty good looking guy, and he was said to have been a charmer. And so I think he was able to, tell this lady a story, basically saying the system was out to get him. He was able to charm her. And in the end, she gives him her son's identity. And he assumes this identity. So, go ahead, Gibbs.
No, so that's huge, man.
Oh, for a guy on the run?
Yeah.
I mean,
that's talking about fresh start.
That's what I'm saying. That's why I called it priceless. I mean,
Yeah.
You can't get something better than that for a fugitive on the run. He goes from being Jeremy Bryan Jones to John Paul Chapman overnight, basically changing his identity. So like we said, he is now transformed into John Paul Chapman, and he takes a bus ride to Tuscaloosa, Alabama. And during this bus ride, he studies his birth date and his social security number, and he memorizes everything. He wants to be able to, give this information out with no hesitation. So he's preparing for a role, almost like an actor would. And this is a role that he's going to try to perfect over the next 4 years. So he gets to Alabama, Gibbs. He ends up staying with some family friends.
If you're trying to portray yourself as somebody else and you're on the run and all that, why would you go to people that know you? You make yourself trackable.
That's a very good point.
I mean, one thing I learned, when you're on the run, you don't go to family. Sons of bitches will turn you in right away.
Is that what you learned? But it doesn't matter. He's not there long. And I think, to your point, he's tracked down by a bounty hunter. So I think that even strengthens your argument, right?
Absolutely.
The first place you go to should not be somewhere that's trackable back to your family.
Yeah. Stay away from friends and family.
Yep. So he's tracked down, but he's able to get away from this bounty hunter, and he takes off to Mobile, Alabama. And it's in Mobile that he meets this guy named Mark Bentley. And Bentley is a home builder, and Jones is trying to get a job in the construction trade. And Bentley says, I really don't have anything for you right now. And Jones says, I'll work a day for free. Let me show you what I can do. I think Bentley was impressed. I guess Jones must have been pretty good, because this Bentley guy ends up hiring him and even lets him stay at his trailer. So again, it goes back to charmers, right? Much easier to make your way through life on the run when you're a slick talker. You're able to charm your way in and out of situations.
You got the look, you got the right words, smooth talking, like you just said. Everything you just said.
Like a Gibby. I mean, basically this guy's a Gibby.
Like a Gibby.
My wife and I do a lot of shopping online, and we always use Rakuten. Rakuten is the smartest way to save money when you shop, because you earn cash back at over 3,500 stores. We're talking fashion, beauty, electronics, home essentials, travel, dining, concert tickets, and more. Your favorite stores like Macy's, Nike, Sephora, Dyson, and Lowe's. And that's just to name a few. Pay Rakuten to send them shoppers. And Rakuten then passes on a part of that payment to its members as cashback. Cashback is deposited directly into your PayPal account, or Rakuten can send you a check. You can even maximize your savings by stacking cash back on top of other deals, like store sales and coupons. You're already shopping at your favorite stores. Why not save while you're doing it? It really is a no-brainer. Membership is free, and it's easy to sign up. Get the Rakuten app now and join the 17 million members who are already saving. Cashback rates change daily. See Rakuten.com for details. That's Rakuten. Your cash back really adds up. Hey folks, see if you've ever had this problem. You're trying to eat a little healthier, but you're in the grocery store aisle, you're looking at packaging, nutrition labels, and they're so confusing, you don't know what's good for you and what's not. Well, this is why I love Thrive Market, my go-to online grocery store for getting all of my healthy essentials delivered, and I don't even have to leave my couch. Finding better options for the whole family is easy with Thrive Market's Healthy Swap Scanner. Just scan a product, and it instantly recommends healthier swaps. This is how my wife and I found our new favorite snack, IQ bars. Sometimes I eat one in the morning with my coffee, sometimes just later on in between meals. They also have so many on-site filters that make it simple to shop by the needs of everyone in the family. Maybe you have someone who needs gluten-free food, somebody that has a peanut allergy. Well, no more scouring ingredient labels when you can just filter it all on Thrive Market. My wife and I often use the high protein filter to stock up on things like Sieti chips. Ready to make the switch? Go to thrivemarket.com/TCAT for 30% off your first order, plus a free $60 gift. That's THRIVE market.com/TCATT. thrivemarket.com/TCAT. It was said that Jones was even dating a bunch of women in Mobile. I'm confident enough to say it. He was a decent looking guy.
I'm not.
You're not confident?
No, not to say that.
I'll say it. I mean, you'll see his picture we put up on the Facebook page. He was not,
But you have a lot of man crushes. I'll just say that. And we'll move on. I know.
I've got man crushes.
Yeah.
This is not Otis Toole, right? So if you've ever seen Otis Toole, if you saw him walking down the street, you would run to the other side of the street, because he looks like what you think a serial killer should look like.
Yeah.
I mean, the guy only had like 3 teeth, and none of them were touching each other.
Right.
This guy, Jones, he looked like a normal dude. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. I mean, you can put him in that same basket, like, Scott Peterson.
Yeah. Or if you're going to stick with the serial killer theme, you put him more like in a Bundy.
Yeah, that's true.
He had a normal look to him.
Yeah.
He was a charmer like Bundy was. Jones would eventually fall out with Bentley because he was strung out on meth. And that's something that's pretty hard to hide from anybody. Bentley, he's letting him stay at his trailer, but he has to kick him out. So Jones ends up moving to a hotel. And again, I don't know how it happens, but the guy just kind of lucks into one thing after another, because he meets this guy named Craig Baxter. And Craig Baxter is a man from Georgia who is just working temporarily in Mobile, and they hit it off. However, whatever reason, they hit it off to the point where, and I can't see myself ever doing this, but Baxter says, hey, if you're ever in Georgia, give me a call. And it's really just a couple months later, we're talking May 2002 at this time frame. So Jones had been beaten up by some thugs and he had no money, right? So he's getting a little destitute. He's getting a little desperate. So he calls up Baxter, and Baxter ends up wiring him $50. I don't think these guys spent a ton of time together. I think they met each other. So either this guy's a good Samaritan, or
I think it's the other way around. The guy's got a lot of charisma, man.
I do think so, because if you read up about Jones, you will see the word charmer again and again. So he gets his $50, and the very next day, no warning, Jones, he's stitched up all over his eye. He got the hell beat out of him for some reason by somebody. He just shows up on this Craig Baxter's doorstep, charms his way into Baxter's house, and is allowed to stay in the basement. I mean, I have friends I've known 25 years. I'm not sure if I'd let him stay in the basement.
I don't think your wife will let them stay in the basement.
No, exactly. And Baxter wasn't alone. He was married. He had a wife. His wife just would later say she had the worst vibes from Jeremy Jones. He was out all night, again, probably doing meth. He's strung out on meth. And he just made a lot of weird comments. And one was, they were watching something on TV, and there was somebody's young daughter, and he just said, something that you just shouldn't say about somebody that young. And Jan just remembered feeling very uneasy about that, as anybody would. They end up having to kick Jones out, using drugs, acting a little, crazy. So what does he do? He just goes to the next door neighbor's house. He's acting all upset. The neighbor lets him stay at his house. I mean, what is going on with these people?
Yeah.
Not only does he let him stay at his house, he gets him a job at this refinery in Douglasville, Georgia, where the neighbor was a manager. Now, how did he get that job? He got the job and was able to pass a background check as John Paul Chapman. Right? This is going to come into play down the line. He couldn't have passed it as John Jeremy Jones.
Right. He had to use his fake identity.
Because John Jeremy Jones has a bunch of warrants out for his arrest. So he gets this job and he starts training as a welder. So one night, the neighbor and Jones, they head out to this tavern. It's a popular tavern in town. It's called Gibson's. Not Gibson's.
Yeah, get it right.
Gibson's. I don't even know if I'm saying the difference. Now, it's at Gibson's this one night where they're there. Around midnight, there is a woman dressed up in a Betty Boop costume, and she leaves the bar to go, out to her car. This woman's name is Tina Mayberry. It's just a few minutes later, getting to her car, that she staggers back to the bar. And she'd been stabbed repeatedly, and she would end up dying a couple hours later. Now, this is another one that Jones would later go on to confess to. Now, Gibson's comes up again because this is where Jeremy Jones, or John Paul Chapman, whatever you want to call him, this is where he found his girlfriend. They met at this bar. She would later say that their first date was Olive Garden and a movie. And she had nothing but just complimentary stuff to say about him. He was kind, he was very loving, all that gushy stuff. And they end up moving into an apartment together in September of 2003. And he's barbecuing with the neighbors and acting like Joe America, obviously as John Paul Chapman. And one of the neighbors has an 18-year-old daughter named Brittany. And Jones starts talking Brittany up. And for some reason, he knows a lot of details about her, which I think set off alarm bells in her head. And she asks her mom why she had told this guy so much about her. And her mom says that she never told him anything. Now, in this apartment complex, a lot of stuff happened, right? Because you got to figure Jones is still on drugs. He's still doing meth. At one point, Vicky, his girlfriend, calls the police, says she's scared that her boyfriend, Mr. Chapman, was going to hurt her, but she doesn't press charges. The police come back another time. Apparently, it was said that Jones was on a 2-week meth bender. And then in October of 2003, he is arrested. And he's arrested for allegedly exposing himself to Brittany Godfrey, right? We talked about Brittany a little bit.
Right.
And she said to the police that she was very scared of Mr. Chapman. He had been coming to her apartment repeatedly, turning the doorknob, trying to get inside. And he would wait till her mother had left for work. And she said one day he'd be at the front door trying to get in. The next day he'd be at the back door. And she said some mornings he just sat outside his apartment drinking beer and talking to himself. So again, he's not in his right mind if he's on on these long-term meth benders, right? Nobody would be.
No. And it's probably getting worse.
I think it is getting worse. It's progressively getting worse because the Godfreys would later state that they found a box outside of their daughter Brittany's bedroom window. And inside this box, there was rope, tape, and binoculars.
Holy.
It's basically a Gibby kit. I don't know where this guy got your kit from, but
yeah. It's a good kit.
It's a good kit.
Kind of freaky, man.
It is freaky. And luckily, nothing ever happened to Brittany, right? So that was the good thing. I think it scared her.
Oh,
which it should have.
Absolutely, it should have.
Because I think that Jeremy Jones had designs on doing something to Brittany, and it wouldn't have been good.
No.
Jones is arrested 3 different times in Georgia. In 2003, he's arrested for the indecent exposure. In 2004, he's arrested and charged with 2 counts of criminal trespassing. This is so crazy, Gibbs. We have to talk about it. Because in both of these instances, his fingerprints were sent to the FBI. Both times, the FBI's computer failed to match his prints to his real name, Jeremy Jones. And we both know that his prints are in this computer.
Yeah.
Right? He was arrested, has warrants out for him. His prints are in the computer.
Yeah, I mean, the search shouldn't matter what your name is. It should be just based off the prints, right? That's the whole purpose behind it.
No doubt. For whatever reason, the system failed. Did not return his prints as Jeremy Jones. So what the FBI ends up doing, because they don't find his, they don't make this match, they end up creating a new file under his name, John Paul Chapman. So if a match had been made, and this is the part I want to talk about, authorities would have known that Chapman was Jones, obviously. They would have known that he was wanted in Oklahoma. They would have known that it was because he was charged with 2 counts of rape. They would have sent him back to Oklahoma. Because they didn't, because they failed, it allowed what's going to happen to happen.
Right.
And I think that's the crazy part. And there was so much made out of this after the fact that the FBI, they even had to come out and issue an apology. So along with this apology, Gibbs, they come out and they have to explain what happened. And part of the explanation is that, it's like 98% effective, I think is what they said. So both times he somehow skated through this 2%.
Yeah, he's lucky. That's all I can say.
And it's a little scary too, because you and I talk a lot about, especially on some of the unsolved cases, with the advances in technology, both with fingerprinting databases and new DNA technology, how many of these cases are going to be solved in the future?
Yeah.
Well, not as many as I would like if the effectiveness is not there on matching fingerprints.
Right. It's an issue.
And I feel bad because, so we're going to go through the rest of the cases. And in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, if these were Jeremy Jones, John Paul Chapman, which again, there's some uncertainty around a lot of these,
right,
or some of these, they could have been stopped. They would not have happened had the FBI been able to match him up. So on February 14th, 2004, Jones is down in New Orleans. He murders a prostitute named Catherine Collins. She's 47 years old. And again, this is not one that they would tie him to. He would confess to it later. Just a month later in March, when he's back in Georgia, he and Vicky moved to this place called the Arbor Village Mobile Home Park. And that's in Douglasville, Georgia. And just a few days after they move in, a 16-year-old girl named Amanda Greenwell, she goes missing from the trailer park. Jones and his girlfriend Vicky live in a trailer just very, very close to Amanda's. And unfortunately, Amanda's body is found about a month later in a wooded area near her home. The body was very badly decomposed, but they were able to determine that her neck had been broken.
So there's two victims that might have been alive today if the system would have worked and would have picked up his fingerprints.
Yes, I think that's safe to say. The time between his murders is very short.
Yeah, they're increasing for sure.
Yeah, because we're talking, February of 2014 down in New Orleans, March 12th, and then it's just a month later, April 15th, 2004, a woman named Patrice Andres, she owned a beauty salon. Everybody said that this lady was just unbelievable. Always upbeat, always smiling, joked around with her customers. Everybody loved Patrice. She had left a love note on her husband's car that morning, and the love note read, "The best is yet to come." Patrice had a 16-year-old son from a previous relationship, and it was said that she was just totally devoted to her husband and her son. Now, this beauty salon she owned, it was called Tamber's Trim and Tan. When a customer arrived for her noon appointment that day, the place was empty. The front door was unlocked. Her purse and keys were on her desk. Her lunch was in the microwave, still in the microwave. And her car was out front, but it was parked at a really odd angle, right? It wasn't pulled in
normal.
Yeah, like you would pull into a normal slot.
Right.
The cash drawer was empty. Patrice was nowhere to be found. Now we have to talk about Patrice just a little bit. She did have some drug history, but she had worked very, very hard, and it took her a long time to kick this. But she had done it, and she'd turned her life around. She'd bought this salon, and she, had a great husband and a son. And so, I just want to emphasize that she had a drug problem in the past, but she had worked so hard to kick it and had turned her life around. Now, there was one witness that came forward, and she said that she saw a man in a white cargo van that morning that Patrice disappeared. And as we talk about a lot, Gibbs, right? The community rallied. They had all kinds of people looking for Patrice. There were no other clues, and there really wasn't anything happening. But this is one that Jeremy Jones would confess to. In his confession, what he told police is that he was high on meth, and he was driving around. He got lost, and he decided to stop for directions at a hair salon. Now, what he says is that his intentions were just to get directions and then get back on the road. Once he got inside the salon, he encountered Patrice, and she was there alone. He saw the opportunity. He kidnapped her, he raped her, and he murdered her. And then he goes on to say that he disposed of her body off of a bridge in Douglas County that was about 60 miles away from the beauty shop, right? This is his confession.
Right.
The problem is that Patrice's body was ultimately found, but it wasn't found in a river or anything 60 miles away. It was found behind a church that was only about 8 miles away from her beauty shop.
So that's the problem, right, with his stories.
This is the problem. You can't tell what's real and what's not real.
Right. You don't know what to believe that's coming out of his mouth.
Right. To me, this makes it sound like he's lying.
So are we saying you think he's lying that he did not kill her? Or are we saying he killed her, he's just lying about what he did and how and where he disposed of the body?
It's going to come out because he ultimately changes his mind and says, no, I didn't kill anybody. And what he's going to tell everybody is that, you know, all these investigators are asking him these questions. What have you done? And the more that he would tell them, the more privileges he got.
Mm.
So he got phone calls.
Right.
He got better meals.
So by him cooperating, it turns out really well for him because he gets better cell or better food, better everything.
Yeah, it was said that I think he was able to call his mom, I want to say it was like 200 and some times.
Yeah.
In some span of time where other prisoners would not have been allowed to call that much.
I mean, it doesn't help his case against him because he's saying he's done all this stuff.
Prosecutors have to prove it.
Right.
And we're going to get into that.
Yeah. So he knew how to play.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So again, here we're coming back around with the charmer, he knew what he was up to.
There's no doubt about it. Early on, they were saying, that the guy's been very forthright in 3 different interviews. This was about Patrice specifically, but they've had a hard time confirming it. Now, this was before they found her body.
Well, look, I mean, if I tell you, if somebody got murdered and I tell you, yeah, I did it, but I buried the body out on such and such road and they can't find the body, but they find the body in a dumpster somewhere. I mean, they could arrest me for giving false information, but they can't. Unless they find a way to tag me to that body, they can't do anything with me.
Well, and they would come out and say that he was telling them things that only the person involved in the murder would know. Things that they never shared, they never released to the media, anything.
You can get lucky too, though.
You could.
If you're smart enough, you could kind of eliminate and narrow down what possibly could have happened.
And make up a story that fits.
Yeah, you could give enough detail, but not too much detail that it could fall in line.
Yeah. To your point, the sheriff he comes out and he says, you just can't charge somebody based on a confession. You have to have some type of corroboration.
Yeah, some physical evidence, right?
And in a lot of these cases, unfortunately, we're going to find out they didn't have that. They had some conflicting evidence even, and they didn't have a lot of stuff to tie him to some of these.
Yeah.
In the end, he is never charged in the death of Patrice ever. And, authorities, either they rule him out completely or they just know that they have nothing other than him confessing that would tie him to all of this. Now, in June of 2004, right? Because we're talking about stuff that happens in chronological order, but people don't know anything about Jeremy Jones or John Paul Chapman as far as being a murderous individual.
Well, sure. I mean, we can do it because we're going back in time with all the information, right?
So in June of 2004, he's arrested again for possession of meth, marijuana, a bunch of drug paraphernalia. But guess what happens? They cannot figure out that this guy who's calling himself John Paul Chapman is really Jeremy Bryan Jones.
Even after the last mess up.
No. So this is maybe 3 times that they had a chance to figure this out, and it just doesn't happen, which is sad. It's very sad because just 3 months later, the body of 45-year-old Lisa Nichols is found in her burned down home.
There he is.
In Alabama.
Burn it down.
She had been raped. She had been shot 3 times in the head, and her body had been burned. But the police had a suspect. They had identified this suspect from a car that had been seen in front of Lisa's house on the night of the murder. And through this identification, they figured out that it was John Paul Chapman. Now, apparently, he also had this nickname of Oklahoma,
a.k.a. Oklahoma,
which is a weird nickname to have if you're on the run and wanted in Oklahoma. But, that's just me. I would have went with Johnny Utah.
You would have.
Because I think that's a cool.
You just like Keanu Reeves.
It's a much better nickname. So, like we said, Lisa Nichols, her body was burned. And this one, it's hard to even fathom, but her body is ultimately found by her 2 daughters and a son-in-law. So one of the daughter's husbands. Kind of going back to Justin finding his newlywed bride. Again, I can't imagine 2 daughters finding the burned body of their mother.
It's devastating.
Yeah, it's just really tough for me. A little bit about Lisa. She was born in Mobile, Alabama, had 3 sisters. Her dad was a Marine, so they traveled all over the place. But she would ultimately come back, graduate high school in Mobile, and then go on to graduate from business school. She was married a couple times, had 2 daughters, like I said, and she had 3 granddaughters. This was a woman that was loved, had a big family. I want to put that out there. It's something that you and I try to do. We try to talk about the victims because we want them to be remembered.
Right.
And we want people to understand that, these were good people. Now, we got to talk about Hurricane Ivan. This was 2004, and Jones had moved to Mobile to do some construction work. Obviously, there was a lot of construction work after Hurricane Ivan. There always is.
Of course. After
any big hurricane. And when he got down there, he really liked it, right? And he called Vicky. Now, remember, this is still his girlfriend, Vicky. He called Vicky and told her that he'd found some work and that he thought this would be a great place to live and that she should come down and join him. He made that phone call from Lisa Nichols' house.
Ballsy.
Not only that, but he made it the day before he killed Lisa Nichols. So he was doing a little stalking.
Yeah.
Had been in her house the day before. This wasn't a random murder.
Well, and he was stalking even the first victim, right? We know he was stalking her.
Yes.
So definitely a pattern of his.
All right. So they figured it out. Or at least they think they have, right? They think it was John Paul Chapman that killed Lisa Nichols. So they arrest him in September 21st, 2004.
Tell me they got it right this time.
They got it right.
Okay. Whew.
And not only that, but they're able to charge him with the murder of Amanda Greenwell. And that was the 16-year-old neighbor.
Right.
And they're also able to charge him with the murder of Catherine Collins. That was the 47-year-old woman that was murdered down in New Orleans. So they're feeling really good about these 3. But it's after this is when all the confessing and all of the things start to come out. But again, they still think he's Chapman. And it's not until an alert is issued out to other jurisdictions describing the crimes and that they have a John Paul Chapman with his birth date and social security number, that somebody puts it together. Some agency puts it together and says, no, who you really have is Jeremy Bryan Jones. They're asking the FBI to review their database. So let's go back to the FBI. And this is the exact point in time when the Bureau discovers that they made a huge mistake. So I kind of said it out of order, but this is when they would come out and have to give the big apology and really say, hey, we messed up. We had the fingerprints. Our system didn't pick them up. Now, some confessions we haven't talked about. Jones ends up confessing to killing 5 prostitutes in Atlanta, but the police are never able to substantiate that. Now, those are a lot harder, right, to substantiate sometimes. We have to get into a little psychology talk because Jones has a defense lawyer, and as part of the defense, they have Jones undergo a series of psychological evaluations.
Smart.
And they actually have a psychiatrist who was asked to interpret the profile, and he described Jones as someone that's very calculating but explosive when he doesn't get what he wants. Also, according to the profile, Jones suffers from severe depression and has an antisocial personality. So this is basically where it comes down to: he's explosive, he's a sociopath, and he's incapable of adjusting to a normal life. The psychiatrist goes on to describe him as a man full of rage and somebody that's capable of killing multiple times and to continue killing unless he's caught or stopped some other way. Now, we talked about Jones being a drug abuser, right? His drug of choice was, I think, meth. And at some point, he ends up contracting hepatitis C. And because of that, has liver failure. I don't have a lot of compassionate thoughts about that.
Mm-mm.
Because at one point, he does say that this liver failure due to hepatitis C is going to kill him before anybody else can. Now, right before the trial begins, because we're going to get in the trial, there's a very strange twist that happens because there is a witness for the prosecution that is set to testify against Jeremy Jones. And this man is named William Scooter Coleman. Scooter is
Scooter.
His nickname was Scooter. This guy was 39 years old. He was found dead right before the trial by a member of his family. Now, they would come out and say that there was no signs of foul play. The cause of death at that point was under investigation. I just thought it was very interesting that a prosecution witness, and maybe it's just total pure coincidence that, he had something or, it was his time or whatever, but
just bizarre.
Yeah, bizarre twist. So there's another, I guess what you would call twist that happens in the trial, right? So he's on trial right now for just Lisa Marie Nichols. He's been charged with a couple of others, but right now they're just trying him for Lisa Nichols. Jones ends up changing his story a number of times, but the biggest thing he changes is he goes from having confessed to killing Nichols. By the time that he actually testifies, he is now blaming the shooting and the murder on a neighbor of Nichols. So in his version, this new version, Jones and this neighbor enter the home of Lisa Nichols, and it's the neighbor that shoots Nichols. The neighbor he was blaming had died a few months before the trial began. So the assistant attorney general, he jumps all over this, right? Because he's basically saying, you're blaming a dead guy a guy that can't come in here and defend himself. It's just one more lie that you've crafted. At one point in closing arguments, he said he calls Jones a coward and a vicious murderer. Now, the Alabama Attorney General would go out, he'd come out and say that Jones targeted his prey like any predator. He never showed even an ounce of remorse. He was called a classic sociopath. And apparently, Jeremy Jones testified for some time. He talked about Lisa Nichols. He talked about her family. He never cried one time on the stand. But at some point, he was talking about his mother. And I guess he bawled it was like a baby, is what I took from it. All the defense could come up with is that this theory of that Jones didn't kill Lisa Nichols, the neighbor did. Now, Jones may have covered up the killing. He may have participated in that, but that's not capital murder. That was basically the whole defense, along with the fact that they claimed investigators, basically manipulated Jeremy Jones into confessing while he was still messed up on drugs. That was also part of their defense. And that's where they got into talking about, they were feeding him statements and getting him to confess to things by offering to give him extra food, better food, phone access that he would not have normally gotten in exchange for details on not just this killing, but, confessing to other things. The version that Jones gave in his testimony didn't match any of the prosecution statements or any of their witnesses about the chronology of events. So, again, I think it was a pretty slam dunk case from what I could tell. And what the prosecutors, basically summed it up with was, and told the jurors, is that Jones was staying with the neighbor of Lisa Nichols. This was a few days before Hurricane Ivan hit the area. After the hurricane, there was no electricity. It was basically a blackout, and he used this to his advantage, barged in, raped her, shot her in the head, and then to cover up the crime, he set the mobile home on fire. Then, after she was killed, Jones returned to the neighbor's house, took a shower, watched some hunting videos, and then went to bed. I mean, if that's true, you're a cold-hearted son of a bitch.
Absolutely, man.
So they had Jones' confession, right? But he recanted that. But that's not all they had. They had DNA evidence. They had blood that had been found on Jones's clothing, and that blood matched Nichols' blood. They had a lot of evidence just in addition to his confession. And the last thing they had is they had a taped conversation. And this goes back to Mark Bentley. And if you remember Mark Bentley, he was that home builder that had let Jones stay with him.
Yeah, his wife, Jan, wasn't real happy about it.
I think that was that was Mark. I don't know. The guy stayed with a couple of people, but
right. Yeah.
But Mark Bentley had this conversation, and Jones told Bentley that he killed Nichols. He was high on drugs, and he said, quote, "It was like a nightmare. I was in a movie. I was higher than I had ever been in my whole life." So I'd say that's pretty damning evidence.
Yes, it's there.
So when the trial's all said and done, it takes the jury all of 2 hours to convict Jones of rape, burglary, sexual abuse, kidnapping, and capital murder. Obviously, that's the big one.
The big one, yeah.
And as we talked about in tons of confessions over many months before his trial, he confessed to, I think, up to 20 murders that spanned over about 13 years.
Wow.
But still, the only other two that he was charged with were Amanda and Catherine. So after the jury convicted him, then they had to figure out his sentencing. And that took him all of 35 minutes to determine that he should be put to death. And it was on November 29th, 2005, that the judge sentenced Jeremy Bryan Jones to death. And he's currently sitting on death row. But, Gibbs, to my knowledge, Jeremy Jones has yet to face charges in Georgia for Amanda Greenwell or in New Orleans for Catherine Collins. I don't know that it matters as far as he's probably going to be put to death. It might matter to their families.
Right.
I would think.
I would think so too.
So I'm not sure if that's moving forward. I couldn't find any information on that. Or if they just chose not to pursue it because he's where he should be. His appeal's been denied. He's at some point, he's either going to be put to death or die in prison. But that's not what Jones says, because he makes a statement at one point that says, "One day I'll be a free man. I'll write me a book and laugh my ass off." I'm not sure why he thinks that.
I don't either. Because I don't think
because I'm not seeing it.
I don't see it happening either.
I don't think he's getting out. So this, let's wrap this case up. But the strange thing about this case, and what really fascinated me about it, was this was a bad guy. No, there's no doubt about that. The problem I have with it is he's confessed to so many things that either have not been proved or you can't prove.
Yeah. Just for the fact that he could confess for I think he is a game, right? He played with the investigators.
Yeah.
For sure.
Did he play with them to get extra perks? Did he play with them just because he liked the game? I don't know. Or did he really do some of these things and, want to boast about it? There's a lot of different ways you can look at it.
I think he did them. I think he used it to his benefit to get the most he could out of it. Then he would recant to be like, "Oh, I didn't really mean I did that."
I think the ones that really strike me are the ones where the people were killed and then the house was burned, because that's almost like a signature,
so
right?
You could say those few are on him for sure.
That's my thought,
Yeah.
but
which
again,
is more than enough to kill him.
I just think that the police are not able to get enough evidence to completely prove that he did it.
Yeah.
But I know he did, or I shouldn't say I know. I believe he did a lot more than what he's been convicted of.
Sure.
But in the end, he's probably gonna die. Like he said, he's gonna die of liver failure from this hepatitis C before the state even gets a chance to kill him.
Yeah, and that's probably true. Yeah.
So, and I know we won't shed a tear over that. And I know the families of the victims definitely won't shed a tear over that.
Not a one.
All right. That is the case of Jeremy Jones. So for Mike
and Gibby,
stay safe and keep your own time ticking.
At the turn of the 20th century, rapid industrialization, urbanization, and political corruption were ravaging America. But soon, President Theodore Roosevelt and a diverse group of reformers known as progressives would fight back. Hi, I'm Lindsey Graham, the host of Wondery's podcast, American History Tellers. We take you to the events, times, and people that shaped America and Americans, our values, our struggles, and our dreams. In our latest series, we explore the Progressive Era, which came to be defined by Teddy Roosevelt and others who believed in a strong, active government that worked on behalf of all Americans rather than the privileged few. As the United States entered the 20th century, these progressives hoped to steer the nation in a bold new direction, to launch an era of reform to restore power to the people. Follow American History Tellers on the Wondery app or wherever you get your podcasts. Experience all episodes ad-free and be the first to binge the newest season only on Wondery Plus. Join Wondery Plus in the Wondery app, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify. Start your free trial today.